And I want to begin with that story on the political angle of the country, that now there's that suggestion, there are those proposals that have been tabled before the Building Bridges initiative that suggest to have a ceremonial president and an executive prime minister. What would have informed this, or rather proposals at this time, at this point in time?
I think that they're just that, proposals, because at this time you remember that there are a number of proposals that have come to the BBI. We have the one by Dr. Okoth. You remember, for him, he wants to reduce the number of members of parliament. I'm not so sure he wants to change the structure of the executive.
Right.
Then there is a Kamket one, which hasn't gone to BBI, but of course has gone to parliament. He wants a mixed system where we have a prime minister and a president. I think what really informs this comes from the Boma's draft. If we are going to go the pure parliamentary system, which I suppose is what I am seeing here, that you have a powerful prime minister, then we must not mix ourselves. That means then that we must say that the prime minister gets a direct mandate of the people insofar as an election is concerned. I think it would be ironical to say that you're going to have a president who has to go around the country, sell his manifesto, sell his ideas to people and use all manner of resources, make promises, and then cede that power to a prime minister who is elected by individuals, let's say 300 or so number of people. So I think we have to decide in our minds what it is we really want. I think if you look at the provisions of Article 1 of the Constitution, people exercise their sovereignty directly. And if they are going to exercise their sovereignty directly, the direct implication of that is, let's have the person who solicited and got that direct mandate, that direct sovereign power donated by the people's votes, to be the person who becomes the chief executive. Yeah, but I think to say that the person who goes around the country, uses resources, then become a figurehead, I think is to mix ourselves. The alternative of that is to go the mixed system, which is a France system, and have a hybrid, where you have power being shared. You have a president who is not really ceremonial as such, but a prime minister then who runs the day-to-day government. The president becomes a commander-in-chief. The president is a symbol of unity, receives ambassadors, and then there is a clear separation. That also was on the table sometimes, I think, in the last, before we passed this constitution. But I want to say this, for me, they're just proposals. I think they shouldn't appear as if the BBI has already settled on one.
All right, and of course, if you're joining this conversation, you can text us on 22422, or you can tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya Tsamgituku. The hashtag to use is Daybreak. And we're now joined by the Member of Parliament for Kibra, Ken Okoth. Karibu sana, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Right, and we are talking about that proposal that you see on the front page of the Standard, talking about the radical proposal for powerful prime minister, where there are those suggestions that the president should now be ceremonial, who now will have to appoint a prime minister who becomes the head of government. And we're just wondering, for us to be where we are, what is the challenge you're trying to address by having more positions in the executive, to the extent that a president would remain ceremonial and not as executive as he is today?
I think at the national level, and the set of resources and the set of functions that remain centered at the national level government is what makes our politics very competitive. And we have to think about which of the duties in the Constitution that have been mandated to be duties of the national government, and who will be the executive in charge of implementing that. Is it a prime minister who has a cabinet made of MPs who have some parliamentarians, or who has a cabinet made of cabinet secretaries who are not parliamentarians? Is it a president who has got a direct mandate and things like that? But on the other hand, I don't want Kenyans to forget is we talked about devolution. One of the problems about marginalization in this country and exclusion was that power was being exercised in Nairobi for the advantage of a very small group of people and elite people in power and their interests. And that's where we went devolution. to bring services closer to people, to bring decision-making closer to people, to make democracy work that way. So I think even as we have this debate, we should be talking about county governments and strengthening of devolution.
Right.
What resources do we send to county governments? What are the things we are seeing when we get to around 2022 after 10 years of having county governments? Where have our county governments had weaknesses in terms of that promise that better governance and decision making would come closer to people, resources would come closer to people? How do we make sure that we review so far the progress in devolution, fix anything that's not working there, and take away resources? And to me, this is the end. Regardless of the structure, whether you have a prime minister, regardless of whether you have a president, the question is, does the Mwananchi on the ground feel it? Does the county have the resources, if you're talking about universal health care and agriculture and you name it, all these functions that have been given to the county governments? Are those still money that is staying in Nairobi, being run by a Ministry of Health in Nairobi and our prime minister or a president? Or are those funds and resources that are actually given to the county government to implement its priorities of its health needs in that region? Just to give you, for example.
So, for you,
so to me, I would always say, let us as Kenyans, even as we debate the structure of government, not forget that devolution has been one of the best things for Kenya, and let us make sure we safeguard devolution, we enhance it, we look at its weaknesses, and make sure that the functions we promise our people they would enjoy, the services, the decision-making, the democracy, closer to them at county level. Let that money come along with the functions.
Right.
So the national government stays in with international relations, national defense, foreign security, and issues like that. But decisions that need to be made at the local level, at devolution level, let's do that.
Be done on the local level. All right. And of course, that is a suggestion or an idea that many would support, but there's this, I'm reading from the paper on page 8 of the Standard talking about the ODM proposal that is to adopt the Bomas proposal, or rather the Bomas draft, and talking about the creation of 14 regional units who will elect a regional premier who will oversee several counties. So you look at all this, that you want an executive prime minister. There is the proposal to have a number of counties belonging to a certain region with a regional premier. And people are wondering, is it just a ploy to create positions for retiring governors, or at the core of it is resources to ensure the service delivery? And I'm asking this question in light of what the reports that we've been getting from the control of budget. Several counties showing no allocation or no utilization of funds going towards development, much of it going to recurrent expenditure.
First, I think I'm not so sure that ODM is fronting a powerful prime minister. I think the ODM seems to be oscillating more towards the Bomas draft itself. And I think I want to repeat again, we need to be very clear so that we don't mix up these two systems. The pure US presidential system, I think, is also premised on the fact that we have strong regional federal units in form of the states. And the accountability mechanisms is exercised at two levels. The federal states, which are operating almost semi-autonomously, and at the same time you have a bicameral system where you have the House of Representatives and you have the lower house itself. So in the UK system, the accountability mechanism is based on, this is premised on being in Parliament, and Parliament is the one now that exercises accountability through the structures there. The Prime Minister being there present to answer questions, the ministers being there to hold account, as opposed to an executive which you know, operates at variance with Parliament itself. If you come to the issue about the federal units, I think really this is what was the position initially until some compromise was struck somewhere in between Bomas and Naivasha, where we decided let's go with the 47 as opposed to 14. And I think it makes sense to say let's go 14, because as you can see, the regional blocks, the economic blocks coming, seems to be actually answering to that question, that it may not be sustainable to have broken our counties into small 47 units when it's not sustainable. You've seen the Lake Region one oscillating around the counties in Nyanza province, together with the counties in Western Province to come and try and form a block. You've seen the coastal region also trying to come up with a block. And I think this seems to lend credence to the fact that it would have been better for us to have gone the 14 units. On the question of resource and resource utilizations, I have said here before that I think Parliament needs to consider, the Senate or the National Assembly, to have a law in place that makes a ceiling that no more than 30% of resources that we send. Because as I said, resources were meant to
As it is now, is it just a recommendation or it's enforceable?
What law they have put there, I think, is the reverse. I think they have sort of flipped it up and said that you shouldn't use more than 70%. So it seems to be suggesting that there is a leeway that you can actually spend only 30%. I think it should be the reverse. If we have to cut down on the number of personnel and human resources, so be it. Let's put in some money and retrench. But we can't have advanced an argument where we want to put in more resources closer to the people, services closer to the people, and then end up taking 70% of it and paying to people. I think it doesn't make sense to me. I think we need to relook and put a law in place where no less than 70% of this money should go to development.
So when you said that we should go the 14 regions way, are you saying we go that way as a third-tier system, or we still, or we scrap the counties?
Not scrap the counties. I think, and this really would have to go to a referendum. It's a very emotive issue. If you're going to scrap anything in between constituencies, merging counties, I mean, whom are you going to convince? If you go to Nyanza, you're going to tell Nyamira, merge with Kisii and Homa Bay and Migori. It's a really emotive issue, but if it is one that we must face, it must be based on the economics and the viability long-term of these regions.
I'm asking that because when we went into devolution in 2013, there was the wage bill growing because of you have to now run several units of government, 47 to be exact. Now, if you say that now you create 14 regions to oversee a group of counties at every section, then these are 14 other governments that have to be facilitated. Don't you think we are going against the same spirit of ensuring that we have more resources going to development, and I will be having to finance recurrent expenditure because of the personal emoluments and running government at this level?
For me, I'm not completely persuaded about a third tier, that I'll be honest with you, because if you look at it, we already have the counties, and as Honorable Loch has told you, once you've given people a county, for them to relinquish it is going to be very difficult. To say now that, oh, we're going to combine Lamu County with Tana River County, or we're going to combine Tana River County with Garissa, or Garissa with Wajir. The people are not going to accept that. And this is, that I know, I'm a politician, and once people have tasted the effects of that, it's not going to change. So I think if we have to sacrifice something, let's forget about this second tier of government of 14 regions. What we want instead to do is ask ourselves, how much did we retain in the national government? How much staff and human resource and wage bill is at the national government? If it is not teachers, if it is not police, if it is not military and defense, what aspects of national government do we still need that we otherwise can send down? So the Ministry of Health officials, for example, I come to that example because that's a devolved function. How many are still sitting as health managers and whatever in Nairobi that could be seconded to the counties and still earn those salaries but be doing valuable work in the counties? So we could manage the wage bill in a different way.
So how do you manage that conversation? Who does that?
Right now, we're having the conversation, I can tell you. We're talking to the nation. And to me, as I speak to my fellow Kenyans and what I hear on the street and what I hear in my constituency, is people asking, how does this improve my life? Look, we're heading into a recession. The economy is tough. From 2017, we had a very long, protracted election season. 2018 hasn't been very good in terms of the economy picking up. And globally, the economy is we're looking much to harder times. So when you talk as politicians and leaders about structures of government, we must be very sensitive, because the people ask, how is this affecting my life? If you look at the headline in the other paper, the Daily Nation, they're talking about a crisis in the ministry as cash to reach schools has delayed. So how do you expect head teachers to run schools when they've got children coming in, they don't have the capitation from the ministry to pay their teachers, to buy food, to do whatever it is? They have to go out and get things on credit, and the people who are doing businesses and supply to the schools, if they're not paid on time, those are risky business ventures. Their credit issues will be affected. So I think we must, when we talk about the structure of government, be very careful and ask ourselves a question as leaders: how does this affect and improve the bottom line, the daily life of a Kenyan citizen? Does it help them to get a job for their kid? Does it help them for their business to grow? Does it help them, you know, to put a roof over their head, improve healthcare for their family? If it doesn't, it's not a priority.
Jackie is from Rwanda. Jackie is watching from Rwanda, says that the Rwanda government has a powerful president and prime minister. I wish Kenya can adopt it. The prime minister appoints the cabinet, but only those two and not other funny posts. So talking about the Rwandan system, where the president, yes, will appoint a prime minister, the prime minister will appoint the cabinet, but that's just about it.
Yes, but we have to be careful. I've been to Rwanda. I'm a member of parliament for Kibra. The population of Kibra and the population of Rwanda is the same. So you cannot compare.
That's not
completely.
true.
Google it, fact check it.
The population of Rwanda is about 12 million.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
And the population of Nairobi metro area, so maybe it's not Kibra.
It's about 4 million or thereabouts.
But
but anyway, let me just make the point there is we're comparing apples and oranges. Yes, so what works for Rwanda given their context and their history. You must, and we cannot make decisions devoid of an awareness of our history and why people were claiming for Majimboism, why people were clamoring for multi-partyism, why people, even after we got multi-partyism, have been clamored for the 2010 constitution. And now the reality is Kenyans are asking the rights that were promised in this constitution: right to housing, right to food, right to water, right to education, healthcare. These are in the constitution. How are they going to be implemented? And how are we going to start enjoying them? Will it take 10 years? Will it take 50 years for all Kenyans to live with dignity? So I think there's a difference, and so I apologize to the Rwandese if I made it sound like their country is irrelevant. What works for them, congratulations. They recovered from a very traumatic conflict in the 90s. And if they're building their country and we have good things we can learn for them, great. But even in Kenya, let our leaders be very conscious. And if we have to make political decisions that address historical injustices, that promote peace and cohesion in this country, let us explain that to the people in a way that makes sense, so that we don't have, for instance, a winner-take-all system. You know, the handshake that was done last year has really helped to bring a sense of calm after the tensions from the elections. But beyond that, what do we do after the handshake? So no, we've stopped fighting, but how do we rebuild the country? How do we end corruption and move forward?
I wanted to just make one more quick point.
Yes.
On this debate, and I'm not really saying that's the direction things will go. But the idea of having a powerful prime minister seems to be suggesting, in line with one of the terms of reference of the BBI, one question they needed to answer is why do we have all these fights after every 5 years, after every cycle of 5 years? And the issue here is that we need to make the clamor for the presidency this fast past the goalpost, winner take it all, do or die thing. We must make it unattractive to fight for the presidency to the extent that people will do the things that they do in order to achieve that. So perhaps in trying to make the presidency not so as powerful, maybe we will be answering the question why tribes will want to fight themselves and divide the country and take it to the edge just in order to get there. Whether that is the right formula to use is a different thing, but I think that seems to be the...
Even though, Mheshimiwa, if I recall, the reason why we have devolved units now, it's partly because we wanted first to devolve the units, but also the power, so that at the top, the president does not take it all. But we still haven't resolved that. How many years down the line? Since 2010? I mean, since 2013, we haven't resolved that. So how sure are you that, because apparently, if you have to name a prime minister, that prime minister would most likely come from the party of the president. So how do we resolve the political conflict that comes from our contests?
Remember what my colleague Ken has said, is that we devolved these units, but we kept still a lot of powers and resources, and Nairobi is still keeping a lot of things up there. So when you're doing the idea of devolving power down there, we need to still consider, like in saying, what much more still is left at the central government. That's number one. Number two is that when you have a president not being so powerful, and the prime minister is there. You remember then that whether it's from the same party or it isn't from the same party, you have a situation in which you don't have one single community being able to recycle in and out of the presidency, and I have no problem with that. If you have the numbers, by all means, you will try and use those numbers. But when you have also a situation where a prime minister position is there, it's very possible that community A will get to the presidency, whether powerful or not, and another community will feel included having the position of a prime minister. It speaks also then to the question of inclusivity. Either way, it diffuses that tension and that clamor that getting this presidency is a matter of life and death.
I would say, you know, when we think about devolution, though you've asked the question, it was really meant to address the issues of historical marginalization, where all the power was centralized, winner-take-all in Nairobi. But I also think there's a risk going ahead, and we have to keep talking about it and reflecting on it in Kenya, is did we also devolve conflict to some of these county governments? So if you think of places like Marsabit, Mandera, did we devolve marginalization? Did we devolve the worst aspects of corruption from the national government just to the local level? That is important, because we really don't want that. So we have to be vigilant at both levels. We need to fix what doesn't work at the national level, improve the structure, improve the budget allocations for national duties and functions, and then also improve resource mobilization and allocation to the county governments to do their jobs well, so Kenyans are happy. But it's something we have to keep thinking about, because you will find in another 5-10 years a pattern getting entrenched, and there's a risk that in some of our counties there'll be a new pattern of marginalization, either based on clans, either based on gender, either based on sub-ethnic groups. Who are the ones who are dominant, and are they dominating the positions of MCAs, cabinet, county executive, you know, members, governors in which counties always have to come from what ethnic group? That is a risk, and we also have to keep thinking of that. And it's not a conversation that we hear often, but we must think about it, that the worst aspects and the mistakes that we've seen in our history in Kenya, we don't devolve them and forget to see how do we prevent them. So the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, but all leaders and all citizens have to be very watchful to make sure that devolution delivers, and it's not just another devolved corruption, devolved power management by certain cartels or clans or ethnic groups within counties that then bring marginalization and pain at the local level.